Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider, a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Crest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 149. We're covering Perfecte Caritatis on religious life, paragraphs 9 to 11 on different types of consecration, different types of religious life or other consecrated life. 2 of them are religious, 9 and 10 are religious, 11 is not. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we talked about the need to reform both contemplative and apostolic communities while maintaining the distinctive spirit and mission of each. Today, we're going to talk about the beauty of several specific forms of consecrated life. Paragraph 9 is going to be on monks. Paragraph 10 on non-clerical religious, or lay religious, as they're called. We covered the term lay there, I think, yesterday or the day before. And then 11 is going to be on secular institutes, which are similar to religious, but not exactly the same. I'll explain it then. So, paragraph 9, obviously monastic life. It has 2 subparagraphs. A is talking about how monks are key, serving God humbly. And, B is some specific rules for monks who have also apostolic ministry, because some monks are, also apostolic. So let's read 9a. The monastic life, that venerable institution, which in the course of a long history has won for itself notable renown in the Church and in human society, should be preserved with care and its authentic spirit permitted to shine forth ever more splendidly both in the East and the West. The principal duty of monks is to offer a service to the divine majesty at once humble and noble within the walls of their monastery. Whether they dedicate themselves entirely to divine worship in the contemplative life or have legitimately undertaken some apostolic work or work of Christian charity. Retain, therefore, the characteristics of the way of life proper to them. They should revive their ancient traditions of service and so adapt them to the needs of today that monasteries will become institutions dedicated to the edification of the Christian people. Right? So there is this great history. In the Middle Ages, the monks really saved civilization. All the ancient texts we have, a lot of the ancient knowledge we have, comes from the monks preserving it, right? If they didn't preserve it, it would have been lost. And this was, along with, in a way, hermits, it was really the first form of religious life, both in the East and the West. In the Eastern Church, it's really the only form of religious life, or the main form of religious life, much more than it is in the West, where you have a lot of other communities that are more apostolic and less, focused on this particular monastery and things like that. So the first duty is inside the monastery, right? The first duty is the liturgy of the hours, as the monks, as the Benedictines will call it, the Opus Dei, the work of God. And they also do service there. They also, make things that they can sell, or they can, often spiritual direction, confession. They might, they might offer a school or a college, attached to the monastery, things like that, right? And here, what the council is asking is to revive the ancient traditions, right? Take off the dust, adapt them to the modern world. So 9b is specific rules about semi-apostolic monks, right? So this is monks who do certain things outside of it, right? So, for example, there's plenty of monks who teach at a nearby high school or college. There are monks who are parish priests in nearby parishes, things like that. And they're still living their monastic life, but joining with some kind of apostolate. So let's read 9b. Some religious communities, according to their rule or constitutions, closely join the apostolic life to choir duty and monastic observances. These should so adapt their manner of life to the demands of the apostolate, appropriate so that they may observe faithfully their way of life, since this being of great service to the Church. Right? This is the idea. They can adapt also to apostolate. This idea states monks join the office in the community and do apostolate. Some are kind of, I don't know if this would apply, but like the Dominicans, for example, they meet together multiple times a day and are closer to monastic than like my own community in the sense of how they pray the liturgy hours together as a community multiple times a day like that. So moving on to paragraph 10, it talks about the non-clerical or lay religious. Remember here, lay means those who are not ordained, right? Religious who are not ordained. So all female religious, and then the permanent brothers in religious life, or, in my community, temporary brothers who are on their way to the priesthood and things like that. But more the permanent ones, right? So let's read. So 10a is about respecting this vocation to the lay or non-clerical religious state. And 10b is the possibility of some lay brothers to be ordained priests. So let's read 10a. The religious life undertaken by lay people, either men or women, is a state for the profession of the evangelical counsels which is complete in itself. while holding in high esteem, therefore, this way of life, so useful to the pastoral mission of the church in educating youth, caring for the sick, and carrying out its other ministries, the Sacred Synod confirms these religious in their vocation and urges them to adjust their way of life to modern needs. Right? So this is important. Religious profession in itself is a vocation, right? So like when I knelt down in front of my provincial in 2009 and said, I, Matthew Paul Schneider, in the presence of God and etc., promise of vow, poverty, chastity, and obedience all my life, that is a vocation. Now, in my community, that's obviously going to be followed with ordination in my community. But if I was in some other religious community, that would be the completion of like my vocation pathway, right? And that's important. And this is a reaffirmation of this kind of religious life. There's many great ministries that a lot of these do. You know, you have tons of sisters who are teaching, nursing, running a lot of practical matters, and things like that. Like, for example, as I'm the day before I was recording this, I was talking to one of the daughters of St. Paul about some practical matters about my book. And like the daughters of St. Paul, great ministry. They're the ones who do Pauline Press and things like that, which published my book a few years ago. And we were doing some other things for it. They'll come out probably after this episode, the details about what we're talking about. But anyways, right? So that's a great ministry we have with the sisters there, right? As an example. And need to adjust this to modern times. So moving on to 10b, it talks about the possibility of lay brothers being ordained. Now, this is specifically, one thing to note here is that there are kind of like 3 types or 4 types of male religious life. So you have the purely clerical institutes like my own, where everyone is priest or on the path to priest. You have purely brothers where everyone's a brother, like the LaSalle brothers, they're just brothers. Then you have 2 different ways they can do like priests and brothers. Some think of it as like everybody's the same. And other ones historically, which really Vatican II and the reform of this seem to want to go away from, is having almost like a higher and lower tier of religious life, with the clerics being like the best, the kind of higher ones, and the brothers just being, almost like hired help or something like that. And that's really that was a problematic one that I think a lot of this was trying to address, right? So that's an aspect, right? So that is, let's read 10b and then we'll talk a little bit about it. B. The Sacred Synod declares that there is nothing to prevent some members of religious communities of brothers being admitted to holy orders by provision of the general chapter in order to meet the need for priestly ministrations in their own houses, provided that the lay character of the community remains unchanged. Right, so we talked about the history, and here we're talking about specifically, mainly just brother communities. Say, hey, some of them can be ordained to take care of the ministry in their house, right? So one of the challenges for completely lay religious, whether priests, whether brothers or sisters, obviously not priests, is to have, regular mass, daily mass at their house, right? How do you find a priest to come and say mass every day? Or do you always just go to the parish? Questions like that, right? And that's important. But it's important to note that the Vatican is not saying, hey, you have to do this. It's saying, hey, we're leaving this up to you. You all decided on yourselves in your general chapter. You make those decisions, right? So let's move on to our final paragraph today, 11, which is talking about secular institutes. 11a, respect their nature. And B is talking about specific formation for members of secular institutes. So let's read 11a. Secular institutes, although not religious institutes, involve a true and full profession of the evangelical counsel in the world. This profession is recognized by the Church and consecrates to God men and women, lay and clerical, who live in the world. Hence, they should make a total dedication of themselves to God in perfect charity, their chief aim, and the institutes themselves should preserve their own proper, that is, secular character, so that they may be able to carry out effectively everywhere and, as it were, from the world, the apostolate which they are founded. Right? So, a little explanation. What is a secular institute? So, the secular institute, they have vows, they make vows in that institute, but they're not strictly bound to a habit, they don't necessarily, you wouldn't see them wearing a habit like a nun or a brother or something like that. And they don't necessarily have community life. They can have some degree of community of living together, but it's not an essential aspect like it is for religious, right? And so those are important distinctions, right? And they're also not hermits. They're living kind of out in the world. They're consecrated vows of poverty, chastity, obedience for working out in the world. Maybe one's dedicated to nursery or things like that. There's not as many secular institutions as there are religious communities, but there are a number, and this is what they're talking about. And this is just saying, hey, this is true consecration. They dedicate themselves to this ministry, this apostolate, and this is something of, important. It's something valuable for the Church for those members, right? Obviously, there's many fewer members of secular institutes than there are religious. I don't know the exact numbers, but, it's a much smaller group. So 11b is talking about the need for formation in such institutes. I think there's a need for it in all institutes, both religious and secular institutes, right? And I think it's great to see, like, for example, when you see the or dedicated teachers of that, where they have a house of formation right near a good teaching college, even one that's not a Catholic one, that's just a big public teaching college, because it's important that, we need a professionalism that's helpful for that ministry, that, hey, I have a teaching degree, right? And so I'm going to teach in the school, right? I myself have a doctoral degree in moral theology, so I'm teaching in the seminary instead of teaching elementary school. But same kind of idea for somebody taking, an education degree as a religious or as a part of a secular institute. So let's read 11b. It may be taken for granted, however, that so great a task cannot be discharged unless the members be thoroughly trained in matters divine and human, so that they are a true leaven in the world for the strengthening and growth of the body of Christ. Superiors, therefore, should give serious attention, especially the spiritual training of the given members, as well as to encourage further formation. Right? So we need both the human and spiritual formation. And one of the things here that I didn't note about secular institutes, their idea is to be that like leaven in the world, right? So they're often out there in the world, doing different ministries out there, and they may not even be like super ministry, like, but they're sharing Christ in the world as consecrated persons with the vows. Poverty, chastity, obedience, right? And I'm guessing that there was some issue with how well they were formed to make a specific point of this at the time. There's some issue back at the time. I'm not as expert enough on secular institutes to say much in detail beyond they exist, and there's, at least a handful of them. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs in Perfecting Caritatis, or the next paragraph, which is paragraph 12 on the vow of chastity. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like playlists on individual documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook or X. We also have an email set up for questions and comments. It's Vatican2@sqpn.com. And my website, frmatthewlc.com, has a contact form you can use to make comments.
Amen.